So we've talked about assets and institutions, but I want to bring the picture closer to home and talk about the direct impact of HIV/AIDS on individuals. When we think about its impacts, I want to focus mainly on strategies and coping mechanisms, because that's a main factor that influences hunger and how this class is actually related to HIV/AIDS, is how do HIV/AIDS and hunger interact, and what are the joint problems that are affected by this disease and this problem. Going to the slide, it's important to note that the likelihood an individual will be exposed to HIV depends in part on their livelihood strategies. As I mentioned in the last segment, people who have more transitory or migratory livelihood patterns tend to have a larger chance for the spread of the disease. You'll see in the lecture by Emily Oster that concludes this unit that that holds true in a lot of the statistics and findings by health organizations. There's also strategies such as migrating to earn additional income or engaging in transactional sex to get food that can increase one's exposure. When we talk about migrating to earn additional income, that affects an individual because not only does it move them away from their social safety net or their social clan. Generally people migrate from rural areas into urban centers with hopes that they can work and earn higher income and then transfer the money back to the rural villages. However, as a person moves away, not only do they lose their family ties and they lose the friendships and social ties, they also lose a large part of their identity and tend to engage in more risky behaviors. And they also become very vulnerable because they are isolated to things such as human trafficking and indentured slavery that I talk about also in this lecture. So it's very important to note that as people are moving in response to the disease or trying to cope with the effects of the disease on their family, sometimes those coping mechanisms and strategies actually move them from a place of insecurity to a place of further insecurity. So it's just adding to the problem. Once a household is exposed to HIV/AIDS, its livelihood strategies can change significantly because of the changes in labor. So because people getting this disease tend to be in their working prime, when they contracted the disease and lose their ability to work, generally people will engage in behaviors such as selling productive assets such as a goat or a cow or furniture, etc., and then they'll use that money to pay for the medical costs. And when we think about this, all of these things kind of add together because the impact of HIV on the individual's assets, as well as on the country's assets or the community's assets, institutions, and the individuals, all influence how the individual or the household is going to respond to this disease, and those responses tend to affect their availability, access, and utilization of food, which, when you combine all of this together, affects their susceptibility and vulnerability to food security. I want to take a minute and come back to our food security framework. If you remember, this framework establishes how availability of food, access to food, and utilization of food affects one's hunger status, and then the vulnerability of those three things feeds into this overall hunger status. And HIV, when it enters a community or enters an individual's life, it affects all five of these components of the food security framework because it impacts the ability of an individual to earn an income. So I want to tie up this part of the lecture by bringing you again back full circle to this food security framework, and I'm trying to paint the picture that food security is very much linked to this disease because this disease affects all the social structures as well as the income structure and livelihood structures of an individual and a community and a nation.